My name is Clara Whitmore. I served 23 years in the United States Marine Corps, the last 5 as a Major General. I've led missions most civilians couldn't stomach reading about, held bleeding soldiers in my arms, and signed letters no commander ever wants to write. But nothing, not Kandahar, not the evacuation under fire, not even the moment they pinned the Valor Cross on me in a hospital bed. Nothing prepared me for what it felt like to come home. It was my mother's 65th birthday. The party was at the Hawthorne Room, Eversted's version of upscale class. When I walked in alone, every head turned, and just as quickly turned away. My father gave me that tired half smirk, the one I remembered from being 13 and tracking mud into the house. My sister Isabel clinked her wine glass and said just loud enough for the room to hear, "Well, well, look who made it. I didn't realize they still invited you to these things." Her husband chuckled behind his bourbon. My mother looked away. No one stood. No one offered a seat. I stood for a beat too long, then sat myself in the only open chair, near the kitchen doors, close enough to smell burnt garlic and dish soap. No one asked how I'd been. Someone joked about whether I'd started looking for grocery store jobs now that I was retired. I said nothing. I just sat there, smiling faintly, letting it all burn quietly under my skin. What they didn't know was that I'd just turned down a classified position at the Pentagon because I refused to sign off on a weapons contract I didn't trust, that I still wore a bullet scar beneath my collarbone, that last week I signed papers to take in the daughter of a man who died under my command, and just as dessert was being served, a new voice broke through the clinking of glasses, firm, deliberate, and unmistakably military. "Excuse me," he said, stepping toward our table. "Ma'am, welcome back." "Major General Whitmore." You could have heard a fork hit the floor. I hadn't been back to Eversted in over 14 years. 14 years of combat zones, sunrise briefings, and nights spent writing names into condolence letters. I'd walked across minefields in Kandahar and sat in silence beside mothers who asked why it wasn't their son who came home. And now, here I was, stepping into the Hawthorne Room with the only pair of heels I still owned, a plain navy dress, and hair pinned up like muscle memory. No one turned. Not really. The hostess glanced at her tablet and said, "You're with the Whitmore party?" Like I was late to something unimportant. She led me to the very end of the candlelit table, next to the swinging kitchen doors. A cold breeze rushed past each time they opened. I sat without a word. It didn't take long. "She's back? I thought she was still overseas. Still not married, huh?" I lifted my glass of water and stared through it like a lens, hoping if I held it there long enough, the voices would dissolve. But they didn't. They never did. My sister Isabel made her grand entrance like she always had, sweeping in just late enough to turn heads. Crimson gown, hair in waves, heels like stilettos. She walked straight to the head of the table and kissed the mayor's cheek like they were family. "It's such an honor," she beamed, "to lead New Horizons into its next phase." She didn't look at me, not even a glance. Our mother stood to give her speech. Her voice rang clear across the murmurs and cutlery. She spoke about family, resilience, and blessings. She praised Isabel's nonprofit, congratulated Cousin Reed on getting into med school, and boasted about a 5-year-old's spelling bee win. But she didn't mention the daughter who had worn the American flag on her shoulder across 3 continents. I raised my glass anyway, because my hand needed something to do. A great aunt leaned in beside me, adjusting her bifocals. "What do you do in the military, dear? Logistics, rations, or something with supplies?" I smiled politely. "Something like that." She nodded, satisfied. The truth wouldn't fit into her version of patriotism, and honestly, I was too tired to shrink myself for their comfort. After the cake was served and the small talk wore thin, Isabel finally made her way to me. She leaned down, all charm and artifice, and whispered in my ear, "You really shouldn't have come. Mom didn't want the vibe tonight to feel overshadowed." I didn't respond. I just stared at her. The same girl who once begged me not to leave for basic training, then never wrote back once I did. The same girl who copied my homework in school, then blamed me when we got caught. Somehow, she still thought she had the right to narrate my absence. I just kept quiet, because I knew the story she was telling now was about to fall apart. They didn't know it yet, but something was coming, something real. The next morning, the motel room smelled like bleach and air conditioning and nothing else. No one had offered me a place to stay, not out of politeness, not even out of image. The only message on my phone came from my father. "Thanks for coming. Your mother's tired, not up for visitors." I left the phone face down on the nightstand and walked out into Everstead's two familiar streets. I didn't have a plan, just a need to breathe in air that wasn't perfumed by the past. But this town had a way of steering you toward things you didn't ask for. 2 blocks later, I found myself standing in front of New Horizons, Isabel's boutique nonprofit/brand. The display window was covered with a life-sized promotional banner. And there she was, standing proud in a tailored navy uniform dress with brass buttons and heels, a bronze star medal pinned neatly to her chest. Except it wasn't just any medal. It was the old bronze star design, the one that had been recalled over a decade ago because of an engraving flaw. It was never meant to be distributed. The only way someone would have one was if it had been discarded or stolen. And there she was, wearing it like it was a part of her outfit. Beneath the photo, the caption read, "From family legacy to civic duty." That's when I remembered her words from the night before, said half laughing to a guest over champagne. "My sister tried the military thing, but it wasn't for her. I learned from her mistakes." I stood there, my mouth dry, stomach cold. I didn't go inside. I just turned away and walked down the block toward the place I used to know as home. My father's bookstore still had the same dusty smell, the same brass bell that jingled when the door opened. On his desk was a framed certificate, my name on it, under a fake rank, next to a photo cropped just right to cut off every ribbon. I picked it up. He walked in from the back room, stopped when he saw it, said nothing. "Why?" I asked. He sighed. "Your mother didn't want people to think of you as someone who's killed people. Isabel fits better. She's public-friendly." I didn't say a word. I just folded the certificate once and slipped it into my coat pocket. I didn't plan to attend Isabel's fundraising gala, but after the bronze star in the window and the forged certificate on my father's desk, something inside me itched, not with anger but with clarity. I needed to see what story she was telling next. The Everstead Country Club ballroom was dressed to impress. Crystal chandeliers, polished floors, jazz quartet in the corner, and a curated guest list full of smiles too white to be real. I checked the seating chart and, as expected, found myself at table 12, conveniently placed between the restroom doors and a service cart station. The woman across from me scrolled through her phone the entire time. The man beside me was already on his second bourbon, humming off-key with the band. I didn't mind. They left me alone. Halfway through the night, a man in a navy suit stepped on stage. Tall, silver-haired, and self-assured. Elliot Crane, Isabel's largest backer. The kind of man who smiled with his chin. "Tonight," he began, "we celebrate resilience and vision. Isabel Whitmore represents a future unburdened by the darker chapters of the past. Even with a family name once marked by military scandal, she has risen above." His words hit like shrapnel. Scandal? I had never been investigated. But I remembered the rumors, old whispers from Kandahar. I was medevaced mid-mission after catching shrapnel during a rescue op. Some thought I'd abandoned post. I'd filed my report. It had been cleared. I thought that was the end of it. Apparently, it wasn't. I slipped away from the table, heels silent against the marble hallway. I just needed a second of air, a second without spin. But then I heard voices behind the catering door. Muffled. 2 women, one of them Isabel. She never defends herself. That's the best part. Crane says if we ever need to lock things down, that old letter she wrote should be enough. The one about her squad mate? It shows she covered for someone. It's all we need. The blood drained from my face. There was only one letter she could mean. The one I wrote in a hospital bed. The one that protected Captain Miles Bennett. I had buried that letter like I buried the guilt. Now, I knew who was holding it. Back at the motel, I sat in the dark with nothing but the hum of the air conditioner and the weight in my chest. That letter. I hadn't thought about it in years. I wrote it when I was still on morphine, with gauze pressed against my ribs and blood on my boots. It wasn't a confession. It was a decision, one I made for a man who didn't deserve to be sacrificed to bureaucracy, Captain Miles Bennett. He'd made a call that day in Kandahar, a split-second choice, diverted the evac route to save a group of civilians, breaking protocol in the process. It worked. It saved lives. But it wasn't clean, and someone had to answer for it. That someone should have been me. So I wrote the letter, told command I'd ordered it, protected him. He died a week later. Now Isabel had it, or Crane did, and they were using it like ammunition. I pulled the deployment trunk out from the motel closet. It was dented, dusty, and still smelled faintly of sand and diesel. I opened it with fingers that shook harder than I wanted to admit. Buried beneath rolled-up fatigues and an old field manual was a weathered folder. Inside, the original letter, my draft, my handwriting, and beneath that, something wrapped in cloth. The silver falcon. It was a small insignia pin, no bigger than a thumbprint. Miles had given it to me the night before that mission. "You're the one who'll do the right thing, even if it burns," he'd said. I turned it over, fingers tracing the smooth metal. Then I felt it, a faint seam. Heart pounding, I took my knife and gently pried the back open. Inside was a micro SD card. I stared at it for a long moment, then slid it into the reader on my laptop. It took a few seconds to load. Then a folder popped up. Kfield_confidential. 3 audio files. I hit play. A voice low and steady. "Manifest says medical supplies. You and I both know that crate holds ordnance. We move it before the UN sweep. No questions." Then another voice, familiar, urgent. "Miles. You can't run weapons through a shelter zone. There are families in there, kids." And in that moment, I knew. Miles didn't just die in a war. He died standing in someone's way. The National Veterans Conference in Chicago was a mix of medals, memory, and media tension. Flags lined the entrance. Protesters shouted across the barricades. Some signs read, "Let the truth speak." Others accused people like me of betrayal. I walked through it all with my head high and my hands steady. Colonel Ray Sanderson met me backstage. He didn't waste time. "You pull back now, Whitmore," he said quietly, "and they'll write the story without you." I nodded. No podium could shake me more than the battlefield ever did. The auditorium lights dimmed. I stepped onto the stage in a simple black suit. No ribbons, no decorations. Just my name and the truth I carried. "I used to think honor was something someone else gave you," I began. "But war teaches you otherwise. Honor is what you protect when no one else will." I tapped a button. The screen behind me lit up. First, Kandahar. Images of smoke, rubble, civilians being pulled from collapsed walls. Then came the audio. Miles's voice played over still images of the camp. "You can't run weapons through a shelter zone. There are families in there, kids." And finally, the third file. "If I don't make it," Miles said, his voice unsteady but firm, "tell Whitmore, she'll know what to do." I stood still. Let the silence breathe. Then a figure stepped forward from the side of the stage. Military dress uniform, full honors, a legal officer. "This recording has been verified," he announced. "General Clara Whitmore is not under investigation. She is a federally protected witness." A beat of stunned silence. Then one hand clapped, then another, and suddenly the entire room was on its feet. A reporter near the front called out, "General Whitmore, what do you say to those who accuse you of surviving while others didn't?" I looked straight into the crowd. "I survived," I said, "and I've used that survival to say what the dead can't." As I stepped down, I saw in the last row my mother, standing, tears streaming down her face, my father next to her, hand over his heart. But I didn't stop, didn't wait for their redemption, because this wasn't about being welcomed back. This was about never letting them bury the truth again. 2 days later, Elliot Crane's name exploded across every major news outlet. Veterans scandal uncovered. Illegal arms deal tied to nonprofit donor. Headlines ran faster than his lawyers could spin. By morning, footage of his arrest, gray suit, handcuffed outside his Westbridge estate, circulated like wildfire. The Department of Justice called me just after noon. "You're now classified as a federal whistleblower," the agent said. "Statute 11B protection. You'll be monitored for retaliation. You did the right thing, General." It should have felt like victory. Instead, it tasted like something heavier. Justice comes late and never clean. When I returned to Everstead, the sky was overcast, thick with the kind of gray that made everything look older. My parents had invited me over. First time in years they'd asked anything of me. The house was the same carpet stains, same two soft couch cushions. But the silence was different. My mother spoke first. She didn't try to hug me, just folded her hands in her lap and looked at the floor. "I was afraid," she said. "Afraid of how far you'd gone. Afraid you wouldn't come back. So I started grieving before you even left." Her voice cracked mid-sentence, but she didn't stop. "I thought, if we pretended you were something simpler, something softer, we wouldn't have to explain the hard parts. We wouldn't have to admit we were never brave enough to follow you." My father didn't speak. Instead, he stood, walked to the wall, and took down the forged military certificate, the one with the made-up title and half-truth photo. He looked at it for a moment, then tore it in two. No drama, no speech, just truth, finally unwrapped. "I didn't have the courage to stand with you," he said, his voice like gravel. "But I see now, it was your courage that kept standing for all of us." I didn't cry. I didn't rush in to forgive them, but I nodded once, because sometimes silence says more than an apology ever could. I found Isabel in her office 2 days later, or what was left of it. The walls were bare, the shelves were empty. Her laptop sat closed beside a cardboard box of desk photos and framed quotes that suddenly rang hollow. She didn't look up when I entered, just sat on the edge of her chair, shoulders hunched like the weight of it all had finally found her. "They pulled everything," she said quietly. "The board, the grants, the endorsements. Someone leaked that the metal in my pitch deck was fake." She let out a breath that sounded like it hurt. "I didn't think it mattered. I just wanted Mom to look at me the way she looks at you." She finally raised her eyes. "But I forgot what you had to survive to earn that look." Her voice cracked. "I gave them the letter. I didn't even read the whole thing. I just skimmed it. Crane's people said it was background vetting. I didn't know what they'd do with it. I didn't know it would destroy you." I didn't speak for a long time. Then finally I said, "You don't need to be me, Isabel. You just need to stop turning other people's wars into your stage." There was no venom in my voice, just clarity. She didn't argue, didn't defend herself. She just nodded, as if maybe for the first time, she finally saw the line between admiration and theft, and that she had crossed it. 3 months later, the Marcus Bennett Veterans Resource Center opened its doors on the edge of Everstead. The town that once overlooked me now stood still, shoulder to shoulder, beneath flags and early morning light. The ceremony was quiet, intimate, exactly what Miles would have wanted. Inside the entrance, a glass case held a silver falcon pin, polished but worn. Beneath it, a plaque read, "Proof of survival, promise to speak." I stood in full uniform, not for recognition, but for remembrance. Beside me, Lily, Miles's daughter, held a framed photo of her father. She didn't speak, but her presence was louder than any speech I could have given. Toward the back, I saw Isabel. No press, no camera crew, just her. A white blouse, hands folded, eyes steady on mine. And this time, she didn't look away. A reporter asked, "General Whitmore, after everything, what matters most to you now?" I looked at Lily, at the plaque, at the people who had finally chosen to see. "That this place stays standing," I said, "and that the truth stays standing with it.